All right, back in the basement again today to go over more equipment that I haven't talked about. I've owned this bench for 2 years, and it's high time I brought you some insight into the Sorinex XL competition style bench. Now, my goal for this video, again, just kind of talk about what I like about it, what I don't like about it, how it's been to own, the ordering process. If there's anything I don't answer in this video, which chances are there's going to be some things, leave me a comment in the comment section below. I'll make sure that I answer that for you. Now, first of all, let me just get this out of the way. I think this is an awesome piece. I like it a lot. One of the reasons I bought it, I imagined it would fit in great here in the space. I think it does. Unfortunately, when it's in use, it's tucked against the wall. But like, if this was in like a real gym, like a commercial style gym where benches are like in the middle of the floor in some cases, like this is a cool looking bench. And I'm not just saying that because it's branded my way. I just really like the look of it. Now, for this, the reason I decided to get a dedicated bench is mostly because of my powerlifting wants and needs. So previous to buying this at the time, I had 2 full-size racks in my basement already. I had the white Monster rack that I still have, although I've expanded it now to a 6-post rack. At the time, it was a 4-post one. And I had a 6-post Rep Fitness FB 5000 in clear grind, which was also really nice. But what I found was I was really missing a dedicated bench press. Now, obviously I spent time with Rogue developing the bench prop, which allows you to bring a bench in and have the same consistent setup every single time. But if I wanted to squat, I had to take that out, put it back in. And I really wanted something that was consistently a bench and would emulate very closely to what I'd see in competition. Now, obviously in this case, with an enclosed standalone bench, you also get some features like safety, which you wouldn't have necessarily all the time in other standalone benches. Even in combo racks in some cases where you would have that, it's not as fail-proof and the design is a little bit more jankety because it's meant to be broken down, put back together. So this really kind of called my name. And when you add onto the fact that you could customize it, which is a high priority list item for me, this just made the most sense. Now that being said, I also did consider the Rogue Monster West Side bench, but the time I reached out to Rogue, they were not offering any customization. So depending on the time of year, depending on the customer service rep with Rogue, sometimes they'll be able to quote you certain colors. So you could like get stuff powder coated for an upcharge. But the other customizations they do, if they're even willing to change the colors at the time you contact them, are pretty minimal for home gym users. And I wanted some other customizations, which maybe I could have got if I got that Monster West Side bench and then went other routes in terms of updating the arches or whatever. But this was really calling to me at the time, especially considering the price point, which I'll get to in a second. So this is what I ended up with, the Sorinex XL competition bench. And overall, I've liked it a lot. Now, as far as the ordering process goes, at the point of time that I ordered this, I'd already ordered a couple of other pieces from Sorinex. In fact, I think I've already had my Iron Bear, which is behind me, which I believe was the first piece I ordered. I then believe I might have gotten the GHD, which we saw in a recent video. And I think this was the 3rd big piece I got from Sorinex. There was a couple other pieces I might have gotten from them that I was considering, but didn't end up pulling the trigger on. But this is one of the 3 main pieces that I got from them. And I believe it was more towards the end of the process. So I was kind of familiar with how it goes. And what that means is for me, working with Sorinex from a single home gym user is not the most pleasant experience. There are long lead times in terms of getting someone to actually respond to you, getting quotes to you, updating any emails and whatever. Home gym for them is just not their priority, which I can understand, and maybe you'll understand once you see some of their pricing structures. But again, for me, this bench made the most sense, and I'd already had a relationship where I ordered a couple of items from them. I really liked it, and this one was more appealing to me than the Rogue bench at the time. Now, that being said, from the date that I actually ordered and agreed to buy this bench to the time that it actually got delivered was right around 10 weeks. And when I was ordering, I made sure to ask them, what is the lead time on this bench? And they told me 8 to 10 weeks. They were able to hit that right on the dot. So always make sure you talk to them in advance about what the lead time is, just to set expectations. Probably you're going to look at a longer lead time, especially if you're considering anything custom outside of maybe just color and powder coats. If you're getting stuff custom cut, it might take a little bit longer, depending on if you've done work with them, how complex that logo is. And I say if you've done work with them before, because chances are if they can repurpose something they've already done, like designing my logo for my Iron Bear and putting it on the GHD, that's going to have a quicker turnaround time than having to convert your logo to a file that can then be cut out with a laser and whatnot. This one in particular, though, The customization is what I would consider fairly light. So in terms of the customization that I went with, number one, I wanted white equipment. So all the 3x3 uprights on this, which this is almost completely made out of, are powder coated white to match the rest of my gym. Again, it ties in really well. As part of that, they also ask you what color you want your J cups. So it comes with these sandwich style J cups. These are 1 inch in fashion. I asked for those to be in black, as well as the shackle colors for the safety straps, which these also come with standard. I also asked for those to be in black. Now, these are more of what I would consider a matte black versus like a shiny gloss satin black. And I think it ties together really well. On the top of these posts, you have plastic caps on the top. I think they look good. A higher end feature might be if they actually welded caps on, but again, I like the contrast here. I feel like it's really good in terms of its mix of white and black, and that's why I didn't want to go completely white with all these things. And then I also got custom logos on the archways, which you can see right in front of you. Now, in this case, my initial ask to Sorinex would be to have number one text, bar don't lie. I wanted to get that on there. The archway is larger than something like a circular roundel logo like I have on my Iron Bear, which is how the logos are supposed to go on there, as well as the GHD. A circular logo is what those are intended for. In this case, since there was more space horizontally, I thought bar don't lie would be a great slogan to put on there as I have it on my rack and have it throughout the course of this gym. However, I also asked if they could also work in my logo to this. Now, I didn't want a centered single logo like I have on my archway because that just throws off the balance or the spacing between the letters. And although I like that on the arch for my rack, which I'll hopefully remember to put some B-roll in case you don't know what that looks like on here, I wanted something where there was a logo on either side of the actual branding of bar don't lie. Now, because I've not my first rodeo in terms of getting things customized, and I know my logo itself can be pretty complex, especially if we're gonna shrink it down to fit on here in addition to text, I kind of threw out the fact that, hey, maybe we could just have like a circular cutout on either side, and then we'll just get like a vinyl decal that I'll throw on behind the letters to pop, and it would work out well. Similar again to what I did for my Rogue Monster nameplate. Now, the rep that I've been working with for all of my orders for Sorinex, Dusty, he mentioned that it'd probably be too crammed down there. And at the time I said, yeah, it's fine, makes sense. Looking at this as is, I think it could have worked. But again, I'm really happy with how this looks. And again, these nameplates work very similar to how things are on the Rogue, where they could just be unbolted, unscrewed, and you could change them out if you ever sold this or wanted to update them. Not a super difficult process to do that. So overall, the way this looks is great. The only thing that I'm not showing you that's on here that I actually purchased, where I actually opted in at the time to get the 4 utility, or actually I think I ordered 2 utility pins to go on. So, and they show in the production pictures, and when I first got this, I threw on extra weight storage pins. I didn't have all the weight storage that I have now, but it was a good way to just kind of keep some weights on the bench to weigh this thing down. Not that it needs it, but also just easy access if I'm loading a barbell or whatnot. They're right there, and I had an excess of plates as is. So it just made sense. I have since taken those off, which you might be able to actually see some of the remnants on the powder coating from where it kind of dinged it up from how tight I screwed it in. A tight screwer, what can I say? But overall, the bench for the most part is how I ordered it. I'll talk about that in just a second. In terms of the actual pricing of this bench, I paid for the MSRP of the bench $14.99. I think looking at Sorinex's prices now, which is 2 years later, this bench has gone up about $150 or so. Again, depending on what kind of pad you want on here. They offer a wider pad. I got a standard competition length or width pad on here. Also, if you want to add those storage pins or not, which I did, which I think added like another $100 or so to my order. You then factor in sales tax, depending on where you live, a couple $100 from me. And then the key thing, or the disappointing thing with Sorinex, is you get this nice custom piece, which you're already willing to spend extra money on because you know it's going to be more unique, more customized to you, made in USA. The shipping cost. So shipping for this item at the time, 2 years ago when I ordered it, was $600. Expensive. Sorinex tends to have fairly expensive shipping. They're located in South Carolina. I live in Rhode Island, so basically going up the East Coast. If you live on the West Coast, it's going to be even more expensive. And even now that it's 2 years later, you're probably paying a lot for shipping. So like single items, ordering through Sorinex is a tough pill to swallow if you're not prepared for that sticker shock of shipping. That's why a lot of times when I've tried to talk to them, if I take a look back through my email history, which I still have, so I can show you like actual invoices and things like that, which I'll show you in a second, I usually have tried to bundle things together just to kind of save on shipping, because that is a huge cost. Like considering $1,500, I'm paying almost half of that again, just for the shipping side of it. So all in, this bench with the utility pins that I ordered with the sales tax and with shipping cost me $2,300, which I'm okay with. It is expensive, but again, I wanted made in USA, I wanted customized, and I really like the way this looks, the way it performs. I'll talk about that in a second. $2,300. Now for context, if I'm going to look now at some of the base prices, I don't have, unfortunately, some of the competition prices from back then, but if I take a look at the Rogue Westside Monster Bench right now, the list price is right around $1,500. After sales tax and fees and whatever delivered to my door without any customizations would be right around $2,000. So basically I paid $300 more, give or take, again, because of inflation and how times change. But for $300 more, like I said, I'm really happy. And the nice thing with Sorinex, which you'll see the invoice on the screen, or if you haven't already, they didn't charge me any extra for the customization. So to my knowledge, that stuff is included in terms of what kind of powder coat you want, what you want the colored accessories to be like. And if you have like a request for a custom arch, I was not charged extra for that. I'm hoping that that's the case for everybody and not because I was a repeat customer, because in other instances, what they'll usually do is still throw that in as a line item, like customization fee, $200. And then, oh, hey, we'll give you a $200 discount, you know, simple sales tactic. I'm sure any of you in sales have done that before. You add stuff into the invoice just so you can take it off to make it look like people are saving money, but it's not on there. So I'm hoping that's part of the actual fees of getting this. But overall, $2,300 for this, for the most part, really super happy with it. So let me talk about what I wasn't happy about first. Number one, the pad. So the pad that they're advertised in a competition style bench on their website, and it's still true today, is they offer their normal tar-like pad. I think that's the words they use, tar-like pad, because you'll stick to the bench. Here is the initial pad that they sent me. Oh, it's a big, heavy pad that they sent me. And I'll show you some close-ups here, but the material is actually, in my opinion, very smooth and very slick. It's the same vinyl material, Naugahyde, whatever they're using, that is on my GHD, which for the GHD is fine. I found this to be very slick for bench applications, which was disappointing, number one. But the bigger issue with this is when this pad is mounted on the frame itself, the actual bench height from floor to top of the pad is like 18.5 inches or a little bit more. I'll show you a picture that I used when I sent it to Sorinex to complain, because I was really disappointed with that fact, because this bench is advertised as a competition bench, which you would think means that it adheres to certain specs in competition. And for me, in like the IPF, which is the most standard specs, which most people use even in other federations, the max bench height is like 17.7 inches maybe, or I think it's 16.9 inches to 17.7. I'll throw a graphic up here just to confirm that. But this was too high by about 3/4 of an inch to an inch almost. And that made me kind of upset. So I reached out to Sorinex and I said, hey, I bought this competition style bench from you. It is not competition spec. What gives? And their response didn't help the situation. They wrote back and said, yes, this is a competition bench, but it's competition-like, not competition spec. And the reason I had such a problem with that is, number one, it did not mention that anywhere on the actual product listing page. It didn't say how high the bench was. I should have asked. But again, when you're selling a competition bench, you also have in the write-up, which they still have to this day, that this can be broken down easily so you can put it in your car as you bring it to competitions and meets. You would think that the pad would meet specs. It did not. I was upset about that, and I voiced my concerns. Thankfully, my rep, Dustin, or Dusty as I called him earlier, took care of me in the aspect of, oh, I went back and I checked with my engineers, and that's how the bench is supposed to be made. And unfortunately, in this design, you cannot raise or lower the pad. So the solution was to make me a new pad. So they did hence why there is a different pad than the one in my hands on here. And what they basically did for the most part is they just kind of took some of the padding out. So this bench pad on here is not as padded. I will still say it still has good padding. So it's not just like a piece of wood on here with no cushion. It is better in my opinion than this one. As part of that, as they were going to make me a new pad, I also requested that they change out the material. They mentioned they had a better gripper material, but that would be an upcharge. I wouldn't say I fully Karened on them, but I kind of just put it in context. Hey, look, I bought this. I was under the impression it was one thing. It is not. You're making me a new pad already. I've bought several pieces from you. Could you just get me the extra material for free as kind of like a, I'm sorry, we messed up. And Dustin was able to do that for me. So it has their gripper pad on here, which is the same gripper pad that I have on my Williams Strength stuff, the same gripper pad that I think is on like the Thompson Fat Bench. If you're ever looking for really good material, let me know. I have actually, if I remember, I'll throw a link in the description box. There's some like aquamarine grade vinyl that I've recommended to other people before. It's like the same thing you'll find on this and a lot of the higher end benches. It's really grippy. It's like rubbery versus like a vinyl type material. So that is what is on here and it works fantastic, but very disappointed in that fact that again, I bought a bench because I thought I was getting a competition bench when it's just competition-like. So be wary of that fact, but they did take care of me, but it was just annoying to begin with. And I'll also say that when I first ordered it, the straps were not included. They forgot those. So I reached out and they had them to me within like 2 or 3 days. No big deal overall. Now, some other things with the design on this is that I'll talk about. I mentioned how with this design, how it's bolted together, you can't actually raise and lower this down. I know some of the Rogue models allow you to do that slightly. I wasn't looking for that, and I like the design of this overall. Some questions that I've got from people is, with the post in the front, do you ever hit your feet? My answer is no. It's a single post. Even the supports only go out to the front of it, not to the side. So even if you tuck your feet in theory, you should never hit that. There's also a cross beam here, which you'll see in a second, but again, it's in a place where you should never actually hit it. So I've never had any problems with the design of this bench in terms of usability. One of the interesting design choices to me was the fact that they have these kind of legs in the back for support. So I guess so it won't tip over if you're racking a really heavy bench. And I think in theory, they look cool. I don't think it adds to the picture. I don't think they're that usable, meaning that if you're benching heavy, the weights are going to be down, you're going to be down here, there's going to be support. You could potentially have those pins on there that I've mentioned with more weights on there. I don't think this bench would ever tip in use. So while they look cool, my only really problem with them is the way that they're bolted on is only by a single bolt. And what can happen is no matter how tight you tighten these, like if you're moving this, which I have done a couple of times in this gym, I've found that those legs kind of shift or spin on those actual one bolt. So it'd probably need a second bolt to actually have it really secure. And the place that the bolt is actually connected right now, which is like kind of underneath and the legs angled down, it makes access to that fairly difficult. Could just take them off, but again, I think it really adds to the look on there. And you could actually probably throw some more storage pins on there if you wanted maybe some smaller plates than just 45s, as the diameter might tend to hit the floor a little bit. Other design things that I'm just not a huge fan of is on these J cups, which I do think are nice. They're meaty. The plastic or UHMW they use has held up extremely well. I bench in this thing every single time I bench, which is every single time I train. So 4 times a week for the past 4 years. I've used super aggressively knurled bars, and the plastic on here has held up extremely well. You do have some slight divots towards the front of the actual lip here, and that's because when I set it for bench, I tend to roll the bar forward to get a good grip, but these have held up probably the best of any J cup I've owned. The thing I don't like about them is the bolts that they use to connect these are huge. They protrude a lot. If you're using a bar with the collars close, or if you're not really good at just racking the bar in a centered fashion, you could potentially nick the bar on these. These came into play when I was using stuff like the wide multi-grip bars that I own. You have these big frames in here. You do knock these on occasion. A lot of companies these days have started using recessed bolts, which really clean up the appearance. And I have lots of J cups that I've used on this. I like the big beefiness of these, but again, I like to see those bolts recessed just a little bit. Another thing on here that I haven't talked about just yet is it does have an integrated spotter deck. So I'll show you some B-roll of that. They're nice, they're fine, they're perfect. They're in a good position. One of the things I talked about with the Hansu combo rack that I reviewed before is the spotter feet were actually like way back here. So in order to actually do a handoff to somebody, you'd be kind of almost doing like a front delt raise with these, like you're in prime teabag position, which is where you want to be because you just basically want to lift the bar out for them. The person shouldn't have this huge range of motion, neither should you. So I think the actual feet themselves are in a good position. But again, if I'm going to Karen over stuff with a $2,300 bench, one of the things I just would have liked to seen is they use standard like grip tape on the spotter deck themselves, which is nice. It sticks really well. A lot of people tend to use metal. So like they could have used some of that, diamond plated metal that we've seen on my GHD that I showed you last video. I don't really care because the black actually looks really good here. My issue is that each step requires 2 pieces of tape and the tape's location is not the same on either side. So it's not symmetrical. So there's like a bigger piece of tape and a smaller piece of tape, and the smaller piece of tape is on the right on both sides. And there was no way for me to switch that. So I'd like to see either the tape split down the middle with equal pieces, or maybe instead of having it in, a horizontal fashion, they do it vertically. Some way or another, I would have liked them to both to be equal on other sides. And again, small bit of Karening, but it's just something that I notice. And for some reason, it still bothers me. I don't know why. The last thing I want to talk about before I just talk about the usability of this bench and overall recommendations is the one thing that's different than this that is not OEM from Sorinex is I actually ordered a head protection pad or cover from Stray Dog Strength, which I then placed on this in order to protect the headpiece of benches. Now, if you've ever been to a commercial gym, take a look at any of the benches there, whether it's a dedicated bench press, whether it's an adjustable bench that you can find, a flat bench over by the dumbbell section, and take a look at the head portion. And usually it's like pretty gross. It might be super oily. It might be all cracked up and peeling and they have tape over it, or they might have some kind of head protection on there. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I'm a little bit of follically challenged, and this bald head of mine does tend to put out a lot of little grease and other body secretions that I don't really want to talk about on camera. But I want this to be protected, so I decided to put a head cover on it. This one's from Stray Dog. It's held up extremely well. I think it goes pretty well. The material's a little bit different, so maybe I need to update that. It's also a little bit of yellowing, just again from all the stuff that I mentioned. But that is not standard when you order it. But it was a nice add-on for me that cost me like 70 bucks or something at the time. And I like the way it looks. Again, it really ties it in, and it adds, in this case, a logo to the arches that I was missing previously. Now, in terms of usability, it's a bench, right? I like it a lot. Now that we have the pad height right, it's still a tad bit high by just a bit. It's a little over, I think, 17 6/8 of an inch. So just a tad high by a smidge to competition standards, but it's been really well in terms of usability. I've gotten questions about the safety straps. Do you feel like you have enough adjustability here? I do. If you're planning on using something like monoliths on here, I'm not sure if that would work out so well depending on where you need them mounted and how large they are. But for me, for this setup, this has worked great. My wife, who also trains down here, uses this bench when she benches. She puts the safety straps much lower, but there is enough maneuverability and there is enough, or there is not a ton of slack in these where you're getting super low droopy straps where you need more space to maneuver like you would on something like the Titan straps or the Rep Fitness straps. So straps here are really good. They've held up really well, tie in really well, and you have enough positions here to maneuver in order to make sure that everything is fine. I mentioned this already, but this is all made out of 3x3 uprights. Sorinex does it a little bit different, where Rogue uses offset holes, which means the holes on the front and back are not at the exact same height and position as the holes on the side. This allows you to do some cross mounting where you're not gonna hit the pins, not gonna cross swords, so to say, as we used to say in college. Not a big problem for me because I don't find I mount a ton of stuff on here, but the fact that it is 3x3 allows you to mount a lot of extra stuff. So I'll typically keep actual J-cups on the back, and I actually have my crowbar on here in most use cases. You can also put cups on the front. So if I'm doing some other stuff like bent over rows or something in my squat rack where I want to mount another bar and do other work outside of it to superset in, I can do that on the front. If you want to put a drink spotter on here, you can. If you want to put weight storage pins on here, you can. You could probably throw a dip attachment on here on the rear posts and use that as well. And that being said, I think the one regret I have is if I could do this again, I might actually look to get these front posts a little bit higher to match the ones in the back, just because I think having it a little bit higher would just give you that little bit of extra versatility. So again, that way you could, throw a dip station on the front, if you will, or even for some of you shorter people out there, you could actually probably use this as a squat stand. In case you're wondering, Sorinex, just like Rep Fitness, the width of these racks is 47 inches. So no matter what kind of barbell you use, even if you use competition style barbells with really thin collars, I've never had an issue of banging those into the uprights. But truth be told, I've never had that issue in a 49-inch rack like from Rogue, on bench press at least. On squats, it can make more of a difference. For me, not as much. Now, that being said, because this is 47 inches wide, if you take an extremely wide grip and have long, lanky arms like I do, you could potentially rub the straps while you're doing some wide grip pressing movements. But again, in normal use cases, for the most part, I've never had an issue with hitting the straps at all in terms of with my arms or not. So overall, really great bench. It's expensive at $2,300. If you're looking at it now, I'm assuming it's probably going to creep up more towards that $3,000 range with the price increase on the equipment and also depending on what shipping is these days. But for me, $2,300 for something that's unique, almost one of a kind in terms of I haven't seen very many like this. I haven't seen any other ones with bar don't lie because most people are more grammatically correct than I am. I really like this piece and I would maybe do it again 10 out of 10. I say that only because even though I like having a dedicated bench, like I could probably get a really nice combo rack and replace this and just keep it as a bench for the most part as is, and also squat in it. So depends on what you want. I'm happy with this. If you have questions about it, let me know in the comment section below. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and stay big.